Well, with the name of, I mean, with a name like that, I mean, no, it's fine.
Okay.
With the name, the background is pretty great.
Do you want to maybe...
With a name like Talon, it was waiting to happen.
I know.
There's
You should
so
try
many
to
things that
catch
rhyme with it.
the Village storyline. They have an election theme going on,
That's
and
right.
they
That's right.
use quite a bit
have
of
either
that.
of you seen the 5 o'clock show?
I haven't.
5 o'clock at the Gatehouse stage. There's a show. It's called Court's Court. We're both in it, except at different times. There's a lot of comedy. There's a whole election subplot running through the Village storylines of the day that gets wrapped up there, and also a historical plot point, namely hauling her off to the tower for crimes against the king. That's all wrapped up there.
But I want to say at 3, they do with patrons and everything. They do a kind of spoof on the election, and I know that they've got running mates, and it's the Middle Fingers campaign and the
Sheriff Middle and Felonious
Middle
Fingers.
Fingers.
The Middle
that
Fingers
this
campaign.
Yeah,
I didn't catch that.
That's where.
The rogues, I was like,
That's where that came from. It's Sheriff Middle with his sidekick Felonious Fingers,
So
and
it's the Middle Fingers, and then it's Mayor Weatherby and his running
that
mate.
was actually. I mean, that plot point was suggested by one of the actors, and the people who write our plays just went with it, you know, and the actors added on to it. I mean, we sometimes walk a fine line between, you know, I mean, the Renaissance times, and occasionally we'll let a little anachronistic slip, you know, drop in there. We have had a Sarah Palin character make an appearance.
Who can see Tiddington
Yeah.
from her house?
So, I mean, we have fun, but I mean, more than anything, we try to keep historically accurate, but there are times when we get to have a little bit of fun as actors, as long as we don't send some history teacher in the audience screaming for the hills, you know.
yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Hi.
Hey. That was a test. Always answer
Okay.
her.
I know. Hi. How are you?
Hey.
Okay, blooper reel material.
And cut. Yeah. All right, that's all we need.
What am I wearing underneath this skirt?
What
You
are
don't
wearing
pan down.
Okay.
It's not that kind of video. You're not Larry Flint.
Not yet.
Hey, that's
What?
totally Larry Flint. No.
Okay.
So if you could tell us your name and who you're playing here at the Renaissance.
My name is Fred Nelson. I have been playing Henry VIII at the Maryland Renaissance Festival. This is my 7th year. I've been doing the part since 2002. I took over the role when the previous king, an actor by the name of Bill Huddle, a very beloved man, unfortunately passed on, and I was sent through a rehearsal process and brought in to fill his rather large shoes.
And the lady?
I'm Tiffany Jarman. And do you want me to look?
Always there, yep.
All right. My name's Tiffany Jarman, and I'm playing Catherine Howard. And this is my 2nd year playing Catherine Howard. I played her last year when she was the mistress, and this year she is queen. It's my 5th year on cast.
And your eyes don't deceive you. She is half my age, and I'm feeling very old around her.
He is literally old enough to be my dad. Same age, actually.
But it's better that we were cast this way, because historically, as I understand it,
she was 20 at the oldest when she was beheaded, anywhere from 16 to 20.
Yeah,
And
I
he
mean,
was in his 60s.
and that's a
was
little
his-
nerve-wracking for us to play.
She was his
so.
Ferrari.
Yeah,
His midlife
midlife
crisis.
crisis wife.
Is it fun to play that?
What, the midlife crisis part?
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Oh, it is. I've known Tiffy for many years before she became the queen, and she was always this character in the street. Oh God, there was Daisy, and then before she's always played this sort of little ditzy character in the street that had no problems whatsoever of throwing all formality out the window and just coming up and hugging the king like you're my big teddy bear, and now, as of last year, she was cast in the role of Catherine Howard, who at the time was just beginning to become the king's mistress, and obviously now we know that she moved on to become the queen herself. As a matter of fact, during last year's chess game, she was scripted to step forward and just lavish, she was just this lady from the court lavishing praise upon the king, and the king's like, oh, well, thank you. What is your name, good mistress? And she says, Catherine Howard, and those out in the audience who knew their history go, oh, you're in trouble.
Okay, it just came to me, but what's it like riding the horse in that dress?
Actually, I don't ride it in the full dress. I just wear the overdress. So it's actually quite interesting watching me come out of the costume house, because I have leggings that I'm wearing on underneath of this, and my chemise and my overskirt, and that's it. This and the hoop underneath of it, I don't wear any of that. I have had experience riding horses. I used to show. They're a lot wider than the horses that I've ridden, because they're the bigger work horses.
Oh, those are big horses.
But yeah, I've ridden before a lot. It's just, I'm used to riding English, so I've got the 2 reins as opposed to the 1. But it's been lots of fun. I really, really like it, because this is the second year they've had him out on the horse. But they decided to go ahead and put me on, because this is the first year since he's been coming out on the horse that he's actually had a queen come out with him. Usually he meets them inside the gate. So
I don't know if you notice it, after we get inside of the gate in the morning, the court and the king and court all pause there, greeting people as they come in. That's not necessarily just a PR thing. We're basically pausing there.
We're waiting for me to change.
Because she has run into the costume house and she's struggling to get that hoop on underneath, and we're all just covering for her. Well met, well met.
I take 2 ladies back with me, and I disrobe pretty much completely. They help me with the hoop on. They help me get the skirt on, and then the overdress, and they lace me up. I get my belt on, and then we're out to meet everybody in a way. But yeah, that's dress time. And I actually found out some really interesting information from talking to one of the jousters. They had actually not invented the side saddle until like the 1800s. And the reason they had invented it was there was a man who was showing horses really into riding, and he had broken his leg. And he had an event the next day that he wanted to ride in, so they had actually invented the side saddle so he could sit on the horse with his broken leg. But that wasn't until the 1800s, and because he was so successful with it, and ladies thought, I can ride that in my skirts. But up until that point, they actually did ride astride, because there have been a lot of comments about, Catherine Howard, she's so lewd, and that's why she rides astride, and the king should have known. But actually, they would have ridden astride.
Bottom line, if she gets on that horse in that hoop, the whole world says, hello, hey, queen.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
So I take it both of you are very much into history.
You know what? I came from a rather unusual background. I was a military brat. I grew up in Spain, Korea, Cuba, and 20 years on the island of Guam. None of them I ever received a lot of English history training. When I first received this role, I knew about as much about Henry VIII as anybody who would watch The Tudors on Showtimers. I mean, he was a big fat guy with a turkey leg. He had 8 wives. I didn't know. No, he didn't have 8 wives. He only had 6. And he really wasn't all of that big until later on in life. Now, I'm playing Henry in the older years. Underneath this costume, I'm actually wearing an ice vest, which helps get me through the year, because we've had some pretty hot days this year. But it also serves to bulk me out a bit, because Henry, at this time of life, he had had an accident. He had something wrong with his leg. He was syphilitic. He was hobbling, And as a younger man, he was very strong and tall and athletic. It wasn't until after the accident that his health really began to go downhill, and he began to take on a lot of weight. So I forgot what the question was. I really did. I'm sorry, it's been a rough day.
He into history.
Something about
Really into history.
history. No. As a matter of fact, I didn't pay enough attention as a kid. But I've been put in a very unique situation in that I got into this not knowing anything, well, not much about Henry VIII. And as I'm going along year after year, see, we don't do the same thing over and over again. This is the only year she'll be playing Catherine Howard at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. She's dragged off to the Tower for crimes against the king. Now, of course, you know, next weekend when we get together again, it's like Groundhog Day. It's reset. We start the day over. Once this year is over, it's currently 1541. Next year, it could be 1542 or 1543, whatever management decides, but we will be playing out that year in Henry's life, what's happening to him then. And at that point, I too will learn something new about Henry, about what was happening. Right now, all I know very much about Henry are the years from the beginning of Anne Boleyn as queen through to Catherine Howard as queen. The rest of the life I'm still a little iffy on because I haven't lived that. So it does help me learn a little more about the character, to play out his life year by year and find out what was happening to him year by year, you know, in that fashion.
Do you really feel like you're living?
Pause one moment.
Yeah.
So if you could step a little closer to me. It's better for the eye line, I think.
Okay.
And
How's my makeup?
it's perfect.
We're not allowed
For more.
We're actually, you know, when we perform on stage, we wear makeup, but out here we can't because it make
I
you
do.
a little.
I have quite a bit of makeup on my face.
Oh, do you? Okay. I can't wear any. It just looks silly. King. Why does the king have raccoon eyes? What is that?
I was up late with the queen.
Yes. Everyone was up late with the queen. The queen is, the queen. The queen's got her own interesting storyline.
Which is exactly not, if you know your history.
Yeah, there's rumors.
Catherine Howard was actually a very tragic case.
Tragic is a good word
Very
for
tragic.
it.
And none of it was her doing.
Oh.
Fred, you just said you don't know anything about the history
I don't know
of
anything about the
Henry
history.
VIII.
I don't
So
know
I
anything about the
wouldn't go
history.
talking.
All I'm going by is what I hear all day.
I wouldn't go talking like you know.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. She actually, her parents had both passed away. She knew nothing about court and the way they lived at court. She was not educated. She lived with her grandmother, who really could not have cared less about what the girls in her household did, and there were several girls in her household. So when all the other girls were fooling around with boys and no one was there to say, Catherine, this is not how things happen, she just kind of grew up learning that when you love somebody, that's what you do. She was very young and she was very impressionable. And she was actually brought to the court to be the lady-in-waiting to Anne of Cleves. And it's at that point, she didn't know anything about court. She really had no idea what was going on. She was put in front of the king by her uncle and several men who wanted to, in her family, who wanted to move up in the world. And Henry was already unsatisfied with his current wife. And when she came by, and at that point, he was whacked. I mean, he was a very whacked man. And she was his little red Ferrari. She was roughly 16, 17 years old. And he was roughly old enough to be her grandfather. He was fat. He smelled because of the sore in his leg. He had syphilis. I mean, this was not an attractive man. And she was expected to get a son off of him. And in the process, she fell in love with one of her cousins, who happened to be Henry's closest friend, Thomas Culpeper. And there's a little bit of a reference. Don't know exactly how much historical background is there, probably not much at all, but there is a reference in the morning show, The Letter, at 11 o'clock, that it was the hope of Lady Rochford that if she helped with the rendezvous between Culpeper and Catherine, that Catherine would get a son off of Culpeper, but nobody had to know. Sort of thing.
So